Okay, I'm not 100% sure this is working, so maybe somebody in the chat can let me know whether they can see me or hear me. Sorry for the slight delay. Things aren't going technically quite as well as they should, but hopefully things are sorted out now. But do let me know in the chat. Good, excellent. Thank you very much, Phil. Well, welcome everyone to another monthly update. These things always come around quicker than I think they will. And I always worry that I don't have enough to talk about, but thinking about it, there is quite a lot to go through. So let me get started. Just arranging my windows. So the first, there's a few things I want to talk about. One is some of the work that I've been doing recently, doing cleanup of the underlying texts behind a lot of what we do, including Cite Tolkien and Search Tolkien. So I want to talk quite a bit about that and the stuff I've been doing there. I want to talk about the name index work that I've been finishing up on the Silmarillion, which is going to feed into a bunch of stuff. Relates to the text preparation work. It also relates to a lot of the linked open data work that we're doing as well. I want to briefly talk about some of the work I'm doing on source documents in the history of Middle-earth. I'll do some quick book acquisitions because I've got some fun stuff. And then I want to talk a little bit at the end about the Rings of Power data website that I just launched, which, even if you're not into Rings of Power, is hopefully interesting just from the point of view of visualizing quantitative information about texts. In this case, the subtitle files of a TV show, but still texts, and all of the tooling around that is highly relevant to the stuff that we do with the real, the real stuff, Tolkien's books. Okay, so let me talk initially about some of the cleanup that I've been doing with the underlying texts. So if you consider something like Cite Tolkien or Search Tolkien or the annotation work that we're doing on Rimbe and a bunch of other stuff, any visualizations we do in the little delvings and everything, at the heart of all of that is having a particular text, a particular version of the various works that gets analyzed. And in many cases, that text has to be precise to a character for character level. It matters exactly what the punctuation is. It matters exactly capitalization, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we kept hitting a few times in Rimbe is actually I can show you the way that things work in something like Rimbe and a lot of the work. If I bring up, I'll just there we go. Just organize things. Okay, so just as a reminder for those of you who maybe have not seen a video before, Rimbe is the annotation platform that we're using to do various annotations of the text around the characters and locations and scenes and things like that. Ultimately, stuff beyond that as well. But it's a place that we use to annotate the text. And if you look at something like this example from Chapter 5 of Book 2 of Lord of the Rings, and we've got the actual text itself, and then it's been styled in different ways depending on what additional information we have. Some of that is actually, if I turn these annotations off, I'll point out a couple of things. Even if you just have the base text, if you look at this text, you'll notice that it's got some italics in it. So it's not just plain text. There is styling information that we need to keep track of. The fact that we cannot get out because Gimli is quoting from the Book of Marzabul, that's expressed in italics. So that's sort of the base text. One thing I just want to point out, because it's going to become relevant soon, is notice that these quotation marks are double quotation marks. Just remember that, because I'll come back to that. But if I start to turn on these other annotations, one of the annotations we have is speech. So we know when people are speaking. The reason that this is grayed out is because for the scene annotation that we're doing at the moment in Rimbe, we don't really care about the speech, and so you can optionally mute it. But in order to do that, we need to know what parts of the text are speech. And another thing we do is you can put sentences on their own line, which is helpful for sort of tracking exactly what the sequence and actions are in the text and so on. And this will be again relevant later. We can also indicate the various named entities, the people and places and groups and so on that are mentioned in the text. But notice this is sort of all layered on top of the text. It's very important to have the right underlying text. And the way that I'll just give you a quick. Let me see if I can switch to it. The way that I'll do it here. Although I can't see. Hang on a sec. I need to move around a bit. The way that annotation is represented is actually as a series of offsets, character offsets into the chunk. So in other words, we say that there's a sentence from character 0 to character 21. Well, it's the heading. A better example is the next one. The first paragraph of Lord of the Rings, character 0 through 194 is a sentence. So this is how the sentence boundaries are represented. Same with styling information, like things that need to be highlighted because they're italics. Same with information about speakers, who's speaking, where the speech is, who's speaking, and so on. And that's done as character offsets. And they're all character offsets based on this underlying text. This is sort of the base text. And then all of the information about what to make italics and what's speech and what are named entities and all that kind of stuff is done as character offsets in this. And then this turns out to also be the file that's then used in things like Search Tolkien and Cite Tolkien, because Search Tolkien and Cite Tolkien at the moment don't make use of those annotations. They will. One of the things, just to let you know, I don't think I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it now. Exclusive here on the live stream. It will be possible in the near future, I hope, to do things like search Tolkien within speech or within speech of a particular character. So if you're interested in where does Gandalf use this word, you'll be able to do that because we have that data. That data is expressed in this standoff manner here, and we just need to sort of incorporate that. But the point is we have this base text, and the character offsets are really important. And some of you who have been helping with the annotation in Rimbe know that there have been a couple of bugs where some of the annotations are slightly off by one character, and that's because there's a slight discrepancy in the base text that was used for generating the initial annotations and the base text that's being used within Rimbe. And that was actually sort of the motivation for the cleanup that I've been doing this last month is really making sure that I've got a single base text that's used across for all of these different purposes. And one of the fun things, though, that came about, well, a couple of things came out of cleaning that up. One is that I finally got around to getting the footnotes in. So one of the issues we've had for a long time is we didn't have the footnotes. The footnotes weren't incorporated into the citation system. They weren't in the base text. And so... but now they are. So if you go, at least they're in Cite Tolkien. They're not in Search Tolkien yet because the Search Tolkien hasn't been updated to use the same underlying base text. But if you go to Lord of the Rings, Book 6, say, and we go to the Scouring of the Shire and scroll down, you'll see now that there are footnotes. So there are footnotes included now. Which is good, and I will incorporate those soon into search. Which will be great because it's really unfortunate when you search for a word and it doesn't come up because it's in a footnote. So that will hopefully be helpful to people. Sorry, in the technical issues I was having initially, I didn't get my Windows set up properly, so I'm only just getting a chance to look at the chat now. But hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining live. Wonderful to see you, Michael. And also Rosie. Wonderful to see you too, as well as everyone else. But they're the last two names I see. So hopefully, Rosie, this live stream will pick you up a bit. Okay, so one of the other things that I noticed when sort of trying to establish the right base text is a mistake that I'd made regarding quotation marks. And so one of the interesting issues with quotation marks is if a book uses single quotation marks, well, almost any book will end up using single quotation marks at some point, even if it uses double quotation marks on the outside. If you have embedded quotes, then they'll use single quotes within the double quotes and so on. I've talked before about the fact that there's an ambiguity there if you have single quotes where you can't necessarily tell. And there's actually a couple of really great examples in Lord of the Rings where you have speech in single quotes where there is a plural possessive within the speech that ends in a single quote. And so you have to scan ahead to realize that you're still in speech. So if you have something like the possessive plural elves apostrophe, in speech, which you do get at one point in Lord of the Rings, you don't know if that's the end of the speech or not. And so one of the very first things I did way back in 2018 was go and disambiguate all of those and use XML to use XML tags to indicate the quotes. One of the unfortunate things that happened as a result of that was I lost which particular quotation mark was used in many cases. And at the time I thought it doesn't matter, we just need to know it's quoted. And in many senses, the choice of quotation mark is an editorial decision, not an inherent part of the text. I've slightly changed my mind on that in the context of all this work. And you're right, Michael, double quotes is always more distinctive. It would make life a lot easier. Although you still have the embedded quote issue, but I agree. And so thinking along those lines, I just replaced all of the quotation marks that weren't apostrophes for possession and contraction with Q elements. But I actually lost information doing that. And in the process of trying to bring it back, I made an interesting discovery. This is not particularly novel. Other people will have noticed this. But I noticed that The Hobbit uses double quotes, and The Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion and everything else uses single quotes almost consistently. I look through lots and lots of copies I have of The Hobbit, and this one, which is actually my original one that I had in the 80s, is the only one that uses single quotes. The first edition of The Hobbit used double quotes. The latest edition of The Hobbit, regardless if it's UK or US, uses double quotes. Whereas everything else in The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the Great Tales, all that stuff, all uses single quotes, regardless of whether it's US or UK. First edition all the way through the latest editions. So I thought I would honor that in the underlying text. I thought that's what should show up when you look at Cite Tolkien and you see these quotation marks. They should be single if they're single in the text and double if they're double in the text. That wasn't true a couple of weeks ago, by the way. If you'd gone to you couldn't have gone to this, it's a footnote. But if you'd gone to the previous paragraph, these single quotes here would have been double quotes. But I did lose some I did have to go through and fix up a bunch of stuff, which was kind of interesting. So I think there's a good example here. Let me switch. No, I want to switch to this one. Here. So when the narrator says that Gollum, he got the name Gollum from the way that he swallowed, the horrible swallowing nose in his throat. Notice it says that is how he got his name, although he always called himself my precious. Now, this actually is in single quotes, even though speech in The Hobbit is in double quotes. This is in single quotes. And there isn't a hard and fast rule for when the text uses single quotes versus double quotes. And far be it from me to make any kind of editorial normalization. I had to mark what it was. And so that's what I've done here. I was going to say, in his actual drafts himself, Tolkien switched all the time between them. Tolkien was not consistent about single or double quotes. But in terms of the sort of published text, I'm wanting to at least capture what what the publisher has done. And so I've had to do all this work. The upshot of all this is that we now have the correct quotes, I think, everywhere. We're able to reconstruct what quotes are in the sort of latest print edition or the first edition or whatever it is that we're dealing with. The other thing I just want to mention as well, which relates a lot to the offset issue that I mentioned before, and that is the fact that there is this convention in printing, at least I don't know if it's true in other languages, but certainly in English printing, that where direct speech continues across a paragraph boundary, you don't include the close quotation marks in the first paragraph, or any paragraph that continues with indirect speech, but you do repeat the opening quotation mark on the next paragraph to remind the reader that they're in a quotation. You'll notice this in an extreme way if you look at the Aragorn and Arwen story in Appendix A of Lord of the Rings. The entire thing is a quotation. And so every single paragraph starts with an open quotation mark, but none of the paragraphs except the last one end in a closed quotation mark, because of this convention that if you have a paragraph break within a quotation, you don't put the close, but you do repeat the open. Which is a problem in XML, because XML requires you to properly nest all of your tags. And so one of the things that I did way back in the original XML back in 2018 was indicate cases where a quotation mark does not close or where it's a continuation of the previous quote. So that information is all there. And it would actually be an interesting thing to look at how often that's done. What are the places where Tolkien does use these continued quotes. But one of the interesting things about this convention is that it does throw off the offsets. If you're not showing a quotation mark because something's been continued, then the offsets can get thrown off. There were other reasons why the offsets were off that was causing the bug in Rimbe, but I don't need to get into the details of that. The point is that one of the things that I've spent the last month doing is cleaning up these base texts. And so we now have a single text that is used for Cite Tolkien, for Search Tolkien, once I load it into Search Tolkien, that's used in Rimbe, that's used in Little Delvings and everything, that will be character for character consistent, which is important. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to show on that side of things. Let me switch back to this because I do want to talk a little bit more about the name index stuff. So when I hear you see, I was here, I was showing you, Gimli's in red, the Watcher's in red, and so on. This came from work that I did with Chiara Palladino a few years ago. Well, we did it on Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit a few years ago. I started doing it more recently on the Silmarillion. And that's going through every capitalized phrase and identifying it. And I had not touched it for a while. I went back and as part of this whole text cleanup thing, I wanted to get the right standoff annotations done for the Silmarillion as well as Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so I can start to get that stuff in Rimbe. And so I just wanted to quickly show this other thing that I've been doing, which is all of these capitalized phrases had already been identified in the Silmarillion. What I've been doing is going through and classifying whether they're a character, a group, a location, and so on. And so you can see the way this works, that they're color-coded based on whether they're a person, place, or group, or something else. A solid line means it's the first time that exact term has been used. The dotted line means it's not the first time. But the main thing I've been doing is not identifying these, but classifying them. And I recently finished, I think I was up to 18 before. So I've done 18, 19, 20, 21, 19 and 21, obviously the big ones. 22, I think I just finished last week. But I need to do 23. So if I go to 23, you look, there's a bunch there that are highlighted because I haven't indicated whether they're a place or a person. But this is really exciting stuff because this is going to tie in with all of the work we're doing, the linked open data work that we're doing, anything to basically tie in texts and mentions of things with entities that are a big part of future work that we're doing. So I wanted to finish this up, and hopefully maybe I'll finish this up before I go to Oxenmoot next week. It's another thing I haven't mentioned yet. I will be in Oxenmoot arriving on Wednesday next week, and they're through till Monday. So if any of you are going to be at Oxenmoot, I'd love to catch up with you. Okay. Another thing I just want to show before I get on to book acquisitions. Another thing that I've been doing is, so obviously ultimately, one of the tasks that the Digital Tolkien Project is doing is referencing systems for all the texts. And that includes, of course, the history of Middle-earth. The history of Middle-earth is unusual. In fact, this starts with Unfinished Tales too. We start to get an unusual situation where we've got the work in its own right, of a particular volume of the history of Middle-earth or Unfinished Tales. But we've also got these windows into underlying texts. So Christopher is giving us a version of his father's text. In some cases, especially in Unfinished Tales, it's a modified, edited version of the text. But even in History of Middle-earth, there'll often be changes that he makes. So it's this strange thing, and I've given talks about this before. How what History of Middle-earth is a work in its own right that's got quotations of sort of what I sometimes refer to as virtual manuscripts. They're not actually transcriptions of Tolkien's manuscripts. They're Christopher's sort of scholarly edition of a work that is represented by manuscripts of his father's. And so there's this sort of complicated modelling relationship that I've been thinking a lot about recently. The upshot of it is, though, that when dealing with something like the history of Middle-earth, and a referencing system, citation system for the history of Middle-earth, you can think of it in terms of referencing the history of Middle-earth and the chapters and paragraphs within that. But you can also think of it in terms of the underlying source material. And in some cases, you just want to refer to the Heirs of Elendil text or something like that, or the Shibboleth of Fëanor text, which is different from the chapter in History of Middle-earth that has obviously Christopher's notes and emendations included or not included or put in endnotes and all this sort of stuff. So what I've started to do is kind of sketch out exactly what's going on in each volume of the History of Middle-earth to kind of pull out what are the actual underlying texts that Christopher is bringing together. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is 90% of the complexity of sort of citation systems and markup in the History of Middle-earth is not in J.R.R. Tolkien's parts, but in Christopher's parts. But there's value in just being able to refer to and search in and so on John Ronald's parts, right? So I've started this task of kind of extracting that out, separating what's J.R.R. Tolkien's from what's Christopher Tolkien, so that they can be sort of managed separately and marked up just separately and made searchable and citable separately and so on. So I decided to actually start at the end of so this is Peoples of Middle-earth. And you can see these are just my notes, and I've shared these. I'm happy to share a read-only view of this document. I'm going to continue to go through all of the works just to sort of sketch out, get a high-level overview of what the contents of each chapter is, what the underlying manuscripts are, what Christopher calls those manuscripts, and so on. One of the things this will allow, beside it's very true, Carl, that they don't do diplomatic. They certainly don't do facsimile. That's right. And as I mentioned, in Unfinished Tales, it's kind of silently, you've got no idea what's been modified. Christopher obviously says a lot more about what he does, but there's an incredible amount, and Carl will know more than any other living person probably, what's involved in actually preparing a version of the manuscripts and so on. And I always try to make clear we don't have we don't have public access to the manuscripts. We have these virtual manuscripts that Christopher has prepared that are then quoted in the History of Middle-earth. So this is all part of my step to kind of get a better handle on all of that kind of stuff. Many of you have seen the diagram that I used while I was teaching History of Middle-earth throughout last year. And I want to kind of refine that diagram a bit, make it a little tighter and more linked to the text and so on. So this is all part of that as well. But one of the things that will come out of this is the ability to search home Christopher's parts separately from his father's parts, but also cite having a citation system for the History of Middle-earth. So I just wanted to show that because I have talked in the Discord channel about doing this before and shared this document, but I don't think I've shared this document on a video before. Okay. Yes, I was going to say, the good news is that in the case of Ursula K. Le Guin, the wonderful Ursula K. Le Guin, where we have an opportunity to do things differently, and Michael Everson, who's in the channel, is working on the Le Guin manuscripts at the moment, and I'm very, very excited about the work that he's doing. And my hope is that a lot of the lessons learned from the Digital Tolkien Project will help out with that work with Le Guin. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that soon. But it's wonderful to have you with us, Michael. Okay, let me talk about book acquisitions, and then I will talk about the Rings of Power data site. So one thing I recently got, I haven't read it yet, but it just arrived, is Cities and Strongholds of Middle-earth, which is a wonderful collection of essays on the places in the Legendarium, particularly Cities and Strongholds. I was originally going to help with one of the chapters in this. This was written during COVID, and unfortunately the situation I was in made it impossible to contribute. But the chapter from Robin Reed is in here and does mention the Digital Tolkien Project. The Digital Tolkien Project is mentioned here. But this does look like a wonderful collection of essays. Robin Reed's is of a linguistic nature, somewhat. So I'm excited to dive into that. But this recently came out and just arrived. The other thing, where to put these? Another thing that I recently acquired, I'll just put it here. Sorry, my desk is filled with books. You can see books everywhere. The other thing that I'll share that I recently got, this is it's still in its protective wrapper. I bought this from Tom Ayling, my second purchase now from Tom, the wonderful antiquarian bookseller. This is a concise Oxford Dictionary, which, why on earth would I buy a 1950s copy? It was of the concise Oxford Dictionary. I already actually have a 1950s copy of the concise Oxford Dictionary because it was the dictionary that my mother used in high school, and she gave it to me. But I bought this second copy. The book is very special to me anyway because of my mum, my late mother. But this one was actually given to Judith Tolkien by Michael Tolkien. So J.R. Tolkien's second son, Michael, had a daughter, Judith, and this is the inscription from Michael. One of the things I love about the inscription says, it's got Judith M.R. Tolkien, Stonyhurst, Christmas 1969, from Daddy with love, a basic aid towards the realization of your ultimate ambition. And I would still love to know what was Judith's ultimate ambition that this was a basic aid towards. I don't know if Judith wanted to be an author or what her ambitions were. I would love to find out. But this is special for two reasons. One is in the inscription from Michael Tolkien, but also the fact that it's a concise Oxford dictionary. And I just want to briefly mention one of the other important aspects of the concise Oxford dictionary, important to me. So this was first edited by Henry Fowler, who I've mentioned before. Henry Fowler, any of you who've read Tolkien's articles for the year's work in English studies in the 20s, Tolkien wrote the general philology section, reviewing what philological books had come out the previous year. And in the first one he did of that, so I'm probably going to get the years wrong. I don't know if it was works published in 23 and this was in 24 or 25, I can't remember. I quoted it in the talk that I gave at the 2019 Tolkien conference. But Tolkien is reviewing Henry Fowler's. Henry Fowler had done these pamphlets, basically arguing for split infinitive. Well, arguing that there's no problem with split infinitives, and also arguing that there's no problem with ending sentences with prepositions. And Tolkien reviewed these very favourably, and it's wonderful reading his this review, because Tolkien sort of has a real dig at the prescriptivists who are trying to enforce a Latin grammar on English. And what's interesting about that, so Tolkien was a fan of Fowler's approach to English usage, but one of the interesting things was Fowler was a big proponent of what could be referred to, I guess, as Oxford spelling. And this was something that intrigued me as a kid, right? Because growing up in Australia, you do get exposed to both US and British spellings of things. Thank you, Trotter. Yeah, so it was in 1923. He wrote 23, 24, and 25, and all now out of copyright, by the way. So Trotter and I have been doing some fun stuff with that. But so it was the 1923 one but it was written in 1924, or came out in 1924, I guess. But anyway, Fowler was a big proponent of the Oxford spelling, which as a kid I was intrigued by because, and I was first exposed to it in this book. Because growing up in Australia, you become acutely aware of US spelling versus British spelling, right? So obviously there's things like colour with a U or without a U. But then there's also things like, organisation or realisation, to use an S or a Z or a Z. And the kind of, I guess, naive classification is one's British and one is US. But that's not actually true, because for certain things, not colour, obviously colour with a U is a Canadian, British, Australian thing, and without the U is an American thing. But in the case of something like organisation or realisation and stuff like that, the choice to use a Z rather than an S doesn't actually fall directly on national lines, and the preferred Oxford spelling was with a Z, even though as a kid I thought of that, associated that more with the American spelling. And so I was really intrigued that this book had the Z spelling, and I'm like, I'm going to use the Z spelling. Similarly, one of the other things is connection with an X rather than a CT. So as a kid, I started spelling connection with an X rather than a CT, because that's what Fowler said to do in the Concise Oxford Dictionary. And it's fun to find out that, of course, Tolkien does too. So Tolkien spells connection with an X. The funny thing about the Canadians is I find that the only way I can convince a word processor to let me use Oxford spelling is to say I'm Canadian. Because that's the only thing that will let me spell colour with a U and organisation with a Z. So definitely recommend switching to Canadian. And yes, Fowler's Modern English Usage is a wonderful, wonderful book. I'm a huge Fowler fan, and Tolkien was too. So this is another reason why this book is special to me. But I just want to point out that the word realisation appears in the inscription from Michael, and Michael spells it with a Z. So I just think that's wonderful that we actually get an example of the Oxford spelling in the inscription itself in a book originally edited by Fowler. Okay, so that's that. A couple of other things that I did want to mention. One was that I couldn't help, even though I don't speak a lick of Portuguese, Brazilian or otherwise, I've recently been buying Brazilian Portuguese translations of Tolkien because the HarperCollins Brazil just does a wonderful job. I made the claim in a WhatsApp group that they're the nicest editions, and Sean Gunner corrected me and said the Chinese editions are better, but he agrees that the Brazilian editions are at the second best. So I just want to show you a few of them. This is the Hobbit. And by the way, I do have lots of copies of your Hobbits, Michael, too. So I'm not neglecting your copies of the... Okay, the Czech ones. That's good to know. That's good to know. So this is the Hobbit. There's no... I mean, this is nice. I've got even better ones coming up. But there's a couple of really nice things about the Hobbit. You can probably see that the gilding on the Hobbit name there. Tolkien, the name Tolkien is actually embossed, and you probably can't make it out, but there are embossed runes on the top as well, which is a nice touch. But what I really am excited about is, first of all, the Lord of the Rings. This is the Lord of the Rings set. Again, wonderful gilding, which you can probably just make out if the light catches the gold. But you also get this wonderful box with the 1 ring and the 3, the 7 and the 9 on them. And then the books are just really, really lovely. I won't take them out of their slipcase, but they're just this is a really nice edition of Lord of the Rings. But the main event, because of course it's such a special series to me, and that's the History of Middle-earth. It's really interesting looking at what translations have been made of the History of Middle-earth, because as you can imagine, the History of Middle-earth is a real undertaking for translation. And it's remarkable, the team in Brazil that's been working on the History of Middle-earth. So the whole set is going to be coming out, but I've got 1 through 5 here. And I'll just briefly show them. So this is 1 and 2. Again, I just love this box design. It's just, I don't know, it's just a level up from what HarperCollins is doing in the UK. And they've got the John Howe illustrations on them as well, but they're just this really nice with the ribbon as well. Really nice editions. And I just think a remarkable translation effort to translate these. Some languages just have the Book of Lost Tales. Not many languages have tried to do, as far as I'm aware, the history of the Lord of the Rings, but that's what's just about to come out from HarperCollins Brazil. They're not sponsoring this by any. I wish they would. And then here are 3 through 5. So just really nice. My only slight complaint about this is see that they're just slightly uneven. They don't line up. That annoys me. HarperCollins UK does an even worse job of that sort of stuff. But anyway, these are still absolutely gorgeous, and I love them. One final thing, because I said in Discord, in a Discord, that I would show this. A lot of people have been talking about the latest. I guess they're sometimes calling this the collector's edition of the Silmarillion. I guess it just came out in the US. I've had it for a while from the UK. But I've got both, and I just wanted to show them as a comparison. There's been various. I think Spanish actually has a full. Spanish might be the first to have a full set. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think any other language has a full set of home translated. And in some cases, they were started and aborted. So I think and sort of then restarted later. So in some cases, like Book of Lost Tales was done 20 years ago. And then just in the last couple of years, there's been more interest in doing the others. But yeah, here are the two. This is the UK, or the HarperCollins UK versus. So this is the HarperCollins. Am I getting this right? Yes, this is the HarperCollins UK version. This is the William Morrow US version. Different color, slightly different heights. There's a spray on the William Morrow and a ribbon on the William Morrow that isn't. And so it's interesting. Unlike some of the other cases where we get a slightly different variation between the US and the UK, I think in this case the William Morrow is actually slightly slightly nicer. Anyway, I think that is based on... That would be interesting if the Czechs have finished it. Yeah. Anyway, it's whatever language, it's a remarkable effort to translate History of Middle-earth. One of the nice things, I was talking to one of the main translators of the Brazilian home about this. One of the nice things is if they've kept the paragraph boundaries the same, the citation systems will work. So any paragraph-based citation system that's used will work for both. And I would actually love to do like a search Brazilian Tolkien, or a search other languages. That will be possible as well. Okay, that's it for book acquisitions. I do want to finish up, as is always the case when I don't think I have much to say, is when these videos go the longest. I want to talk briefly about... briefly, I shouldn't use that word. I want to talk about the Rings of Power data site. But before I do that, I just do want to briefly mention I said last live stream that we would probably be hitting 4,000 watch hours in the previous 365 days on YouTube, which enables monetization. And so, monetization's always been, or not always been possible, but has been possible for a while. If you want to join, there's a join button below. You can become a monthly supporter of this channel there, or you can give a one-off super thanks as well. But in terms of running ads, that only just became possible about 3 weeks ago. And you'll be thrilled to know that in that time, in the first 3 weeks, this channel has made $1.17. So yeah, it's not even going to pay for hosting of the website anytime soon, but it's maybe eventually. In terms of a tour of my wine selection, so it's funny, these are just those wines that you can see in the background are just and here's for Carl, I'm going to show a shot of the EDD. These are just the sort of leftovers. I've got a big wine fridge here with 75 bottles and another wine fridge there with 18 bottles. I will definitely do something at some point about the wine. I don't know about pairings with Tolkien. I guess I could do that. That would be interesting to think about. Pairing wine with characters from the Legendarium might be a fun thing to do. Like what would Fëanor drink? Anyway, let me finish off with an overview of the Rings of Power data website. And even, as I said, even if you're not interested in Rings of Power, this is still hopefully interesting because so much of the stuff that I've been doing for this site, and then this site only launched a week or two ago, and this is all based on the subtitle data from the first season. Well, the first 6 episodes. We haven't done the 7 and 8 yet, but it's based on the subtitles from episodes 1 through 6 of season 1, and I'll continue with season 2. As well as the subtitles, the only other thing that's been added is some scene annotations, so scene divisions where the scenes change. And Sarah Monnier has helped out tremendously with that effort. But even if you're not interested in Rings of Power, this is still hopefully interesting because all of this stuff, this visualization I do, the code that I've written and everything is applicable to text as well. And in fact, a lot of the stuff that I'm showing came out of the Belladonna software that I wrote for the Little Delvings. And so a lot of this sort of stuff is what we'll eventually do, not only in Little Delvings, but as part of the Linked Open Data project and just generally surfacing interesting quantitative information about the text. But I wanted to give a tour of the stuff. I'm adding new features all the time, as well as the data obviously coming in from the different episodes. But I just want to briefly give you a tour. So for the 6 episodes that we've currently got the subtitles, so I should say, I skipped over an important bit, which was it's based on the subtitles, but the first step is actually doing the speaker identification on the subtitles. So going through the entire subtitle file and actually indicating who the speaker is. And then doing the scene annotations. And the result is this sort of stuff. So for each episode, we can kind of get this summary data of, for each of these episodes, how many regions it covers, how many scenes there are, characters, lines in the subtitle file, and words spoken. And you can sort of get this, get a summary graph of the words spoken per episode. Episode 6 is a lot lower because it's got the big battle scene. One thing I wanted to do was, if you want to just sort of visually compare any of these more easily, you can just click on a particular column and it will turn that column into a little inline bar chart. So if you want to visually see the difference between the numbers, you can do that. But then you can drill down. You can go to a particular episode. So if we actually go to we'll go to 6 because that's got the big battle. Actually, this is probably not the most interesting one. You get an overview of what regions it's covered, so you can see this episode only has the Southlands and a little bit of Numenor, and that bit of Numenor is really just the sailing to the Southlands. So it's almost entirely in the Southlands. But you get an indication of the regions. You get a breakdown of the scenes with the time codes. You get an indication of words per minute. You also get an indication of what the top 10 characters are by word count, and you get this timeline of speech, so you can see exactly who's speaking with this. I'll just contrast if I go to something like The Great Wave, which features Khazad-dûm as well. You can see, the regions, scenes, words per minute, top 10 characters, and then the speech timelines. So that's sort of scene level information. Episode level information. You can drill down on a particular scene. So if you go to, you can click on this and you can page through each individual scene. You can see where the scene's located, what the time codes are, who the speaking characters were, and then you get the first 2 words of the subtitles. I decided again that it's probably fair use to just give the start of the subtitles. I would love to show the whole thing. I don't know if Amazon will let me do that, but there you have it. There is a search capability as well. So if you're wondering where Elf Lords only, you can search for that and see exactly what time code that's said in, where it's said. In this case, it's spoken by an unnamed character, but you can click on this and get to the whole scene. To get that. You can drill down, you can get a list of all the characters, so there's some high-level character stats like top 10 characters by word count, but then there's also top 10 characters by scene, so how many times each of these characters appears. And the difference is quite interesting, right? If you look at the characters by words, Galadriel's the highest in both, but Durin is number 5 in characters by word count, but doesn't even appear at all in the characters by scene count. So this is sort of interesting metric of words per scene kind of thing that could be calculated as well. And then the other thing you can do is sort of get this summary data about all the named speaking characters, how many episodes they're in, how many regions they're in, scenes, lines, and words. Again, you can click on this to get a graphical representation of the amounts. You can also filter down, so if you just want to see the elves, you can compare the elves and so on. And then there's also regions. So you can drill down into a particular region and find out when that region was featured and what scenes were set in that region and so on. So lots of fun stuff there. I'm really looking forward to getting the rest of the data in, but also applying this obviously to other things. This could be done for the Peter Jackson movies. It could be done for the subtitles. We just need to do the speaker identification for that. I've already done some work. If you've seen any of my talks on aligning texts, I've done some stuff with the Peter Jackson subtitles before. But then, of course, all this visualization software, which is under the covers using Belladonna still, all of that will be possible all of the main work that we're doing, all the annotations that we're doing in Rimbe, and all the other stuff that we're doing with the actual text. Okay, that is it for what I have today. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me and hanging around for so long. This was actually longer than I expected, but hopefully a lot of interesting stuff here. It occurs to me that this live stream is going to have ads in it for the people that are watching after the fact. I don't know when it's going to put the ads. I can see I've got a button where I can say, don't show an ad in this part because I don't want to be interrupted. Maybe I should have clicked that at various points. But anyway. Oh, you actually had ads during it in the live. So how does that work in terms of... I should turn that off then. I don't like that. Did that mean you missed stuff I said, or what? Or you're seeing it delayed? You miss bits. That's terrible. I don't like that. My apologies. I did. If I'd known that was the case, I would not turn on ads for the live stream. I'm gonna turn that off. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm learning all this stuff. I'm new to all this. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. You can skip back and then set the speed faster to catch up. Okay. I will not do that in the future. I will turn it off. I will, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone. I may see some of you in Oxford. It doesn't sound like actually anyone that was here onto the live. Enjoy Jink, Michael, and you're doing absolutely amazing work. I'm really excited for you to be able to share it with more people in the near future. And thank you everyone else again. As Sarah said, don't forget to be awesome. And yeah, I was going to say, Higgy Baby, I'm a YouTube Premium ad-free. I don't, yeah, I can't stand watching the ads, so I'm a premium member too. Anyway, thank you very much, Trotter. I do plan to have a great time in Oxford. Unlike last year when I was writing my MA dissertation that was due while I was in Oxford, I have absolutely no obligations at all this year while I'm at Oxford, not even talking. So thanks again, and I will see you in Discord or see you in the next one.